Jamuna Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So today we'll hear from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 1, texts 18 and 19. And I'm going to read for a couple of reasons, one of which is to avoid dealing with a sandhi problem that just gets confusing. I'm going to read text 18 in the purport, and then we'll read text 19 together. Oh, we don't have a screen. So text 18. Pureshu punyo pavanadri kunjeshu pankato yeshu sarit sarasu anantalingai samalam krateshu chachara tirtaya taneshvananya. Translation. He began to travel alone, thinking only of Krishna, through various holy places like Ayodhya, Dwarka, and Mathura. He traveled where the air, hill, orchard, river, and lake are all pure and sinless, and where the forms of the unlimited decorate the temples. Thus he performed the pilgrim's progress. Who's he? Anybody?
What's that?
People are whispering in their masks. Vidura! Thank you. Yes, Vidura. Sometimes, if we haven't been thinking about this during the days, since the previous class, or if we haven't been for a little bit, we don't know. We may have all these pronouns, but no antecedent here anywhere in the verse. Srila Prabhupada's purport. These archa forms of the Lord may be considered idols by the atheists, but that does not matter for persons like Vidura or his many other servants. And the his here is capitalized, so that means the Lord's other servants, not Vidura's other servants. And we'll see, Vidura wasn't traveling with the retinue. He didn't have an entourage. He was on pilgrimage as an avadhuta. We'll discuss that. The forms of the Lord are mentioned here as Anantalinga. Such forms of the Lord have unlimited potency, the same as that of the Lord himself. There is no difference between the potencies of the archa and those of the personal forms of the Lord. The example of the post box and post office may be applied here. This is a common analogy that Srila Prabhupada used. Not so much analogy, more of a metaphor. Analogy would be a little more complex. This is a metaphor or simile that Srila Prabhupada used frequently. The little post boxes distributed all over the city have the same potency as the postal system in general. The duty of the post office is to carry letters from one place to another. If one puts letters in post boxes authorized by the General Post Office, the function of carrying letters is performed without a doubt. Similarly, the Archa Murti can also deliver the same unlimited potency of the Lord as when he is personally present. Vidura therefore could see nothing but Krishna in the different Archa forms, and ultimately he was able to realize Krishna alone and nothing else. 18. Gam Paryatam Medhya Vivikta Vritti Gam Paryatam Medhya Vivikta Vritti Sada Pluto Adha Shayano Bhuta Sada Pluto Dha Shayano Bhuta Alakshitaha Svaya Avadhuta Vesho Alakshita Svaya Avadhuta Vesho Vratani Chede Harito Shanani Vratani Chede Harito Shanani Kamparyatam Medhya Vivikta Vritti Sada Plutotha Shayano Vadhuta Alakshita Svaira Vadhuta Vesho Bratani Chede Harito Shanani Kamparyatam Medhya Vivikta Vritti Sada Plutotha Shayano Vadhuta Alakshita Svaira Vadhuta Vesho Bratani Chede Harito Shanani. Others please. Kamparyatam Medhya Vivikta Vritti Sada Plutotha Shayano Vadhuta Lakshita Svaira Vadhuta Vesho Bratani Chede Harito Shanani. No one else? Synonyms? Gam, earth. Paryatam, traversing. Medhya, pure. Vivikta Vritti, independent occupation for living. Sada, always. Apluta, sanctified. Adha, on the earth. Shayana, lying. Avadhuta, without dressing of the hair, etc. In other words, not doing yourself up. No makeup, no hair, no earrings, and nail polish and stuff. Doesn't mean necessarily without any clothes. Alakshita, without being seen. Svai, alone. Avadhuta Vesha, dressed like a mendicant. Vratani, vows. Chede, performed. Harito Shanani, that pleased the Lord. Translation. While so traversing the earth, he simply performed duties to please the Supreme Lord Hari. His occupation was pure and independent. He was constantly sanctified by taking his bath in holy places, although he was in the dress of a mendicant and had no hairdressing nor a bed on which to lie. Thus he was always unseen by his various relatives. Responsibly, please. While so traversing the earth, he simply performed duties to please the Supreme Lord Hari. His occupation was pure and independent.
His occupation was pure and independent.
He was constantly sanctified
He was constantly sanctified
by taking his bath in holy places,
by taking his bath in holy places.
although he was in the dress of a mendicant
Although he was in the dress of a mendicant,
and had no hairdressing,
and had no hairdressing,
nor a bed on which to lie.
nor a bed on which to lie.
Thus he was always unseen by his various relatives.
Thus he was always seen by his various relatives.
Srila Prabhupada's purport. The first and foremost duty of a pilgrim is to satisfy the Supreme Lord Hari. While traveling as a pilgrim, one should not be worried about pleasing society. There is no need to depend on social formalities or occupation or dress. One should remain always absorbed in the function of pleasing the Lord. Thus sanctified by thought and action, one is able to realize the Supreme Lord by the process of a pilgrim's journey. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Mukhaṁ karoti vachalam langhupam garyate girim Yatkripatamaham vande Shri Gurun Dinataram Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvesha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Pureshu punyo pavanadri kunjeshva pankattvayeshu sarit sarasu anantalingaya samalankriteshu chachara tirtaya neshwan ananya. He began to travel alone, thinking only of Krishna, through various holy places like Ayodhya, Dwarka, and Mathura. He traveled where the air, hill, orchard, river, and lake are all pure and sinless, and where the forms of the unlimited decorate the temples. Thus he performed the pilgrim's progress. Gampariyatam medhya viviktrivritti sadapratodha shayano vadhuta alakshita swayara vadhuta vesho pratani chedeva itoshanam. While so traversing the earth, he simply performed duties to please the Supreme Lord Hari. His occupation was pure and independent. He was constantly sanctified by taking his bath in holy places, although he was in the dress of a mendicant and he had no hairdressing, nor a bed on which to lie. Thus he was always unseen by his various relatives. Unseen by his various relatives means they wouldn't have recognized him. Vidura was a member of court, so he dressed nicely. Where, when you go to the office, I don't know about nowadays when you go to the office, it means you turn on Zoom and you wear sweatpants. You might have a shirt and tie on top, but you're wearing sweatpants or underwear. Otherwise, nobody knows. But when you go to the office, you dress up. Maybe not so much as before, but my dad never went to work without a coat and tie. Here in the islands, it's a little different, a little more casual. Even lawyers don't wear coats and ties to work. They keep them in the office for when they have to go to court. And some, shoes and socks. Like our Jack Schweiger, our old friend Jack Schweiger, he used to get fined in court for contempt because he would forget to put socks on when he got dressed to go to the courtroom. I mean, if you ever seen Jack in his office, he'd be wearing shorts, a t-shirt, and slippers. He'd get dressed, and many lawyers, most lawyers were a little more formal. They at least like wear khakis and low shirts or something like that, the guys. And the women would also have their version of dressing up for court. But Jack would also often get dinged because he'd forget to put socks on because it's Jack. So to go to court, you dress up and you do your hair up. You keep it clean and oiled and combed and back or tied up or whatever you did, or cut. You go on pilgrimage, not so much. There's a passage in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Jaiva Dharma where one of the Babajis, I think it's Advaita Das Babaji, who had previously been Lahiri Mahashai, a resident of Shantipur, and very expert Carnatic singer, very expert at classical. He studied classical singing in his youth, and so when he joined the Babajis, they'd be sitting around singing kirtan or singing bhajans or something, and he'd join them with all these fancy alamkaras that he would, and they would all look at him like, what? And after a while, he realized he didn't exactly fit in. Their singing was all about bhava. Their singing was decorated by their bhava, not by all these fancy things that you learn in music school. So after a while, after he had spent some time among the Babajis, and I guess after he had been given the name Advaita Das by his guru, one of his old school friends had sought him out and found out he was living at the Godruma Dweep among all these Babajis. And now this school buddy he'd been working in the Muslim government, and he was all dressed up, like in his nice Gucci shoes and snazzy Italian suit kind of stuff, his fancy clothes that kind of fit in with the official culture of the time. And he was appalled by the appearance of his friend. And he castigated him. He said, I just don't know what to make of you. You got your shaved head with your sikam in the back, and got like a basket of tulsi beads around your neck, and you're wearing a rag. You don't know how to dress nice. You don't know the latest fashions. And you seem to be just kind of like missing out on the point of life. And Babaji Maharaj replied to him. He was actually so annoyed by this guy showing up and interrupting his bhajan and doing all this puffery that he just thought, how can I take this guy off and get rid of him, So he just got, he just spoke very bluntly, and he said, frankly, when it comes to clothing, it only needs a couple of qualities. It needs to be clean and not stink. That's all. So this is the business of somebody who's on pilgrimage. Here Vidura is described as Abhadhuta Vesha. He's dressed as an Abhadhuta. Abhadhuta means someone who has shaken off society or been shaken off by society. So they've shaken off all social conventions. So they either shave, generally sadhus will either shave their heads or dread it. Shave their hair off or dread it. They're described as, wearing jata. Anybody know how the one place Narada Muni is described in some detail in the Bhagavatam? How he's described as his hair? Golden jata. I have yet, I think it's upstairs, right? Golden Dasis. I have yet to see a picture of, I hope I live long enough to see someone paint a picture of Narada Muni with golden jata, golden dreadlocks. Anyway, so, when you're on pilgrimage, it's not about observing social convention. You need to be clean, you need to be clean and pure inside and out. So here, Vidura is described as constantly bathing in holy tirthas. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out, constantly bathing meant constantly bathing, because if he happened to touch something impure, then he would go back into the water at that either that holy bathing tank or holy river or whatever. And he was on pilgrimage to all these different holy places. All these places around Varsha. Ayodhya, Dwarka, Mathura. These are all places of Krishna, the Lord's pastimes. And he went to places that were pure. He didn't go to the city and hang out. I mean, this had been his life up to that point. And he took this insult from Duryodhana as an excuse to be done with all that stuff. And he went on pilgrimage and dedicated all of his energy to simply satisfying the Lord. He didn't worry about whether there was going to be a nice place to sleep, whether there was going to be nice food. He didn't worry about having his hair combed and oiled and having nice clothes or anything like that. As a matter of fact, Vishwanath describes him as being clothed in tree bark. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but sometimes you'll see Ram, Lakshman, and Sita in the forest dressed in what looks like pieces of tree bark or something like that. Talk about austere. I don't know if that means that they would pound it out into kappa like the Hawaiians. And the Hawaiians made their cloth from the bark of certain trees. And you'd see the process of pounding it out, on the slab of wood, kind of rounded slab of wood. You keep it wet and keep pounding it until it's thin and soft and pliable and wearable. But it's probably not even something as comfortable as that. So this was Vidura's whole business, and then we'll see at a certain point he arrives at Prabhasa Kshetra, and hears about the events there, which we'll hear described over the next couple of days. So this pilgrimage business, this is actually an important spiritual practice, not just in Asian society, but in European society as well. I mentioned this the other day. In England, there would be a couple of different pilgrimages. One pilgrimage would be from London to Canterbury to the shrine of St. Thomas of Becket to offer homage to this English saint, and from that pilgrimage we have, as I mentioned, Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, written late in the 14th century, late 1300s, in Middle English, where I think it might be a couple dozen stories that people told that kind of tell a little bit about the culture of the time, the culture of England at the time, and some of the ways it was changing and some of the ways it was screwy. And so we have this tradition in England. There's an English scientist, I don't remember what his field is, Rupert Sheldrake. He's a little famous or infamous. He's famous for having a TED Talk taken down by TED. Because although he's a scientist, his religion is not scientism. That's one thing that I'd like to point out every once in a while. Srila Prabhupada didn't have a problem with science. We use science all the time, right? Somehow or other I'm being streamed live on Facebook, and then I'm going to have to see myself on the YouTube later or something. And it's horrifying, frankly. But Srila Prabhupada came to the U.S. on a steamship, a result of science and engineering. He flew from New York to San Francisco at the beginning of 1967 on an airplane, his first trip on an airplane. Mukunda Maharaj tells the story nicely in his book, Miracle on 2nd Avenue, And so Mukunda and Janaki, they decide after they get initiated, they decide they're going to go to India, go on pilgrimage to India. So they drive out to the west coast, and they go up to Oregon to turn their friends Sam and Melanie onto this bhakti yoga thing that this Swami they met on the Lower East Side had introduced to them. Sam and Melanie and Mukunda and Janaki thought, look, there's a whole hip scene in San Francisco, a lot like Greenwich Village, a lot of bohemian type beatnik people and stuff like that. A lot of them would probably get into that. So, before they went to India to visit holy places, that Janaki and Mukunda would go with Sam and Melanie, who very soon became Shamsundar and Malati, to San Francisco. And a lot of people really thought that this Hare Krishna chanting was really cool. And so they decided they were going to try to establish a temple there like they had in New York City. So they rented a storefront on Frederick Street and a couple of apartments upstairs from this storefront place. I actually saw this place in '69 when I was in the Bay Area getting out of the Navy on the weekends. One of my acquaintances from the Navy, a friend, Michael Brazell, and I, we'd spend the weekends in the city with his sister and her roommates. They were San Francisco State students, and they had a bunch of left-wing Jewish San Francisco State students, a bunch of radicals and artists and stuff. And they had an apartment in between the panhandle of Golden Gate Park and Kezar Stadium. So we walked, the first weekend we were there, walked around Haight-Ashbury district, which wasn't, even then, what it had been in '66 and '67, to be quite honest. It was a huge disappointment in a lot of ways. We were walking down Frederick Street toward the panhandle of Golden Gate Park, and I saw the Hare Krishna temple. And I had chanted with the devotees here in Hawaii couple months before, maybe 3-4 months before, in May, when Kusha and I both met the devotees at a Jimi Hendrix concert. And I really liked the chanting, so I saw the Hare Krishna temple, and I told Mike, I want to check this place out. He was got really nervous, so I just thought, he's my host, his sister's our host, I don't want to offend him and end up having to spend my weekends on the base until I'm discharged. So I just went along with it and missed a big chance. So Mukunda Maharaj tells a story about how they got this place, and then they organized this benefit concert at the Avalon Ballroom to benefit the Radha Krishna Temple, which was this little storefront that really wasn't much other than a place for people to come down and chant Hare Krishna and to come down from their overnight trips and have some vegetarian breakfast with the devotees. And so then Mukunda called Srila Prabhupada in New York, and Prabhupada answered the phone. He heard Mukunda's voice, and so Mukunda said, we actually, Swamiji, we started a temple here, and we're going to have a benefit concert. And Prabhupada said, oh, nice, that's nice. And so then Mukunda says, and we'd like you to come here to inaugurate the temple and to attend the benefit concert, to lead the kirtan at this benefit concert. And Prabhupada said, oh, okay, that's very nice. And they're about to hang up, and Prabhupada says, Mukunda, how will I get there? I mean, he hadn't left, except to go up to, what's his name's ashram. What was this? Dr. Mishra's ashram. Out of the city. He hadn't left New York City since in a while. And he'd certainly never traveled across, and so he said, well, you'll fly, And we'll buy a ticket, it'll be waiting for you at the gate at the airport. The devotees will take you to the airport, you'll get on the plane, and we'll greet you here at the airport. So it's just this really cool story that Prabhupada is, oh, so how will I get there? He didn't, he says, okay, yeah, I'll come. Oh, the dates? Okay, fine. How do I get there? So, I don't know how I got there. Kind of a long walk here. So, anyway, this business of pilgrimage, it's a really common thing. And also, in English literature, we have John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress, fairly well-known book, probably not widely as read as it is known, kind of like Proust's remembrance of things, of times lost. A lot of people talk about Proust, but not very many people have actually read the entire thing. It's over 3,000 pages, 1.25 million words, and it's intense, amazing stuff. So The Pilgrim's Progress was an allegory. The actual title, I think, is something like The Pilgrim's Progress from This World to That Which Is to Come. So it's an allegory of actually making spiritual progress, and all these metaphorical figures appear along the way and create obstacles or encourage this pilgrim whose name, he was born as graceless, and now his name is Christian. So this is a well-known phenomenon. And then also in Spain, we have this famous Via de Santiago de Compostela. It's this pilgrimage in Spain. It takes maybe a couple of weeks or something to make if you do it on foot. And of course nowadays a lot of people do it on a bus, and there are various, there are hostels and hotels and things, and people who have rooms for the pilgrims along the way, and people just, they eat what they're, you go on pilgrimage, you got your pack, you got your stuff in your pack, you don't have a lot of fancy stuff, and you eat what there is to eat along the way, and you sleep where there is to sleep where you find room. Although I guess nowadays, people with some money and accustomed to comfort might find ways to other ways, they go in a bus or something like that. But it's meant to be a period of austerity and reflection, and actually having a way of shaking off the rest of the world. I remember it felt like being on pilgrimage when we would go to India before. The only times I've been to India were 1980 and 1982. And when you go to India then, that's it. You're there on pilgrimage. There's nothing else going on in the world. You don't know what's going on. You don't, your wife and children, your jobs, whatever, everything, it's 10,000 miles away. And who knows whether you'll ever see it again. I remember being in Vrindavan in '82 during Kartik. We began Kartik with a Gurukula Headmasters Conference for a week or so, and then we all just stayed for the rest of the month. Nobody had computers. There were no laptops. There was no internet access. Nobody had phones that we carried around with us or anything like that. You're there. You're cut off from the rest of the world. And I was aware that my wife and kids were back here. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't even know there was a huge hurricane that hit. Until I got back and saw that the windows to the apartment were boarded up, and there had just been this big earthquake, big hurricane. So, we didn't know. And I remember one day we were walking down to the Jamuna in the afternoon to bathe, and some devotees had just come from New Delhi. And we're walking along, we kept ourselves pretty much immersed in Krishna Katha the whole time we'd been there. A few of us, I remember Dwarkanath, Bicharu, Shukavak, somebody else. We would go over to Madan Mohan Temple and just sit around outside Madan Mohan Temple in the afternoons and read nectar devotion together. It was just really nice. So one afternoon we were walking down to the Jamuna to bathe, and this devotee who had just come from New Delhi, I guess that morning, he said, "Oh, you know, Brezhnev died." And it's like this big, it felt like this big leaden cloud had all of a sudden just kind of settled in. It's like all of a sudden the world, the outside world intruded. And we stopped and I looked around and I said to the other devotees, "Oh, all that stuff's still going on out there, isn't it?" You know. So this was the business of a pilgrim. And so I mentioned Rupert Sheldrake. Sheldrake's a scientist, but he's very interested in spiritual life. His wife is very famous in kirtan circles, especially, I guess, in Europe and the UK. She's interested in like sound as a vehicle for spiritual realization and healing and stuff. And and Sheldrake wrote a book called Science and Spiritual Practices, something like that. And he discusses how these different I think he looks at 7 different spiritual practices. One of which is meditation. I think the first one is meditation, and another is prayer. One is pilgrimage. One is chanting and singing. And he examines the ways these spiritual practices affect our bodies, our minds, and our hearts. And so, this pilgrimage. This is an important spiritual practice around the world. And so this is Vidura's thing. He goes to all these places where you go to these holy places, and there are temples where the Lord is being worshipped. And Srila Prabhupada talks about how the Archamurti of the Lord, actually, because he's not a representation of the Lord. The devotee's vision, he says, Prabhupada says, the atheists just consider them idols. But that doesn't matter for persons like Vidura or the Lord's many other servants. They don't care what other people think. When they go to see the deity, they see the Lord. When they go to see Radha Govinda, they see Radha Govinda. When they go to see Radha Raman in Vrindavan, what they see is Radha Raman. They don't see a statue with kind of like big, funny, stylized eyes and all that. When devotees go to see Banke Vihari, they see Shri Radha Banke Vihari. They don't see some statue or icon or idol or anything like that. They go to the extent that they're purified, and they see the Lord there, and they're able to actually have an exchange of Lord. We see how this plays out in a couple of places in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. One is Sakshi Gopal, where we see that the Lord is not just some statue, but he's actually there to witness these promises that were exchanged, and he's there. He follows this young man home to validate this promise that he's received from this gentleman. And another is Kirachar Gopinath, where the deity of Gopinath and Rimuna feels Madhavendra Puri's heart when Madhavendra thinking they're offering all these different kinds of kheer, different kinds of sweetness. Speaking of the Archa Murti, when the devotees come here, they see Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, Sri Advaita Acharya, Gadadhar, and Srivas in the courtyard of Srivas Thakur's home. So the deity of Gopinath felt this, that Madhavendra Puri was on this is whole different, yet another story about how the Archamurti is not an idol or a statue or just a representation of the Lord, but the Lord himself. Madhavendra Puri's Gopal, who is now worshipped as Srinathji by the Pushti Marg devotees in Nagpur. In Gujarat, is it?
Rajasthan.
Rajasthan, yes. Thank you. And and Gopal told Madhavendra Puri, I'm hiding here in the bushes. I've been waiting for a while for someone to come take care of me. And so Madhavendra Puri goes on pilgrimage because Gopal is asking for some sandalwood paste to cool him off in the hot summer. So he goes across the country to get some decent sandalwood, and he's bringing it back. And he stops in Rimuni, goes to see Gopinath, and he sees all the different kinds of far out kheer, all the different sweet rices that are offered to the Lord. He's thinking, man, it'd be really nice if I knew how to make some of those. I could get the remnants and taste it. I could know what's in them, and I'd be able to make it and offer it to Gopal. And so Gopinath hears Madhavendra's heart, and he stashes some behind his clothes, and then he tells the Pujari in the middle of the night, psst, psst, by the way, I've hidden away some of the kheer. I want you to take it to the marketplace where Madhavendra Puri is sleeping, and bring it to him. He needs to taste this. So he goes. Of course, the Pujari is a little freaked out that the deity generally kind of engages in a sort of Mauna Lila. I mean, how often do we really hear the deities speak to us? To be honest, not frequently, probably for most of us. And all of a sudden, here's the deity telling him, psst, psst, not just talking to him, but he's telling him that he's stolen some of the sweet rice, and he's stolen it for this particular devotee, and that he needs to take it now to the marketplace. So, he's going around the marketplace calling out to Madhavendra Puri. He says, Gopinath has stolen some sweet rice just for you. And Madhavendra's like thinking, oh my God, got to get out of here. Because all of a sudden, this is just too weird. People are I'm going to become famous. And he's just a mendicant. He's on pilgrimage, on a mission from God. And so he skedaddles. Still, the story gets around, and he's become famous. So we see from these different pastimes in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita how the deity is not. This isn't just some official thing. This is the Lord appearing in a way that we can handle, and to benefit us, for our benefit, by giving us an opportunity to render service. So we know, almost 50 years ago now, going on 49 years in a couple of months, Srila Prabhupada visited Hawaii to invite Sri Panchatattva to come here to bless the people of the Hawaiian Islands, and by giving us all some opportunity to render service. So that's why the temple's here. I'm sometimes a little amazed to see how folks, and it's generally Indian folks, they'll come to the temple and they see that tree out there, and the first thing they think is, I gotta have some mangoes. And I've been observing, it used to be, they would bring things here for the Lord, but now they're coming here to get something from the Lord, and it's not even in the form of prasadam. They're running around and looking. Of course, they're picking up mangoes that we haven't had a chance to pick up yet, so it's, no harm, no foul, but it's just, there's a mentality behind it that I feel behind it that strikes me as something different from 50 years ago. The Lord appears among us in order to give us an opportunity to render service. Here in Srila Prabhupada in the purport to 18, It says the archer forms of the Lord may be considered idols by the atheists, but that doesn't matter for persons like Vidura or his many other servants. They have the same potency as the Lord, and they're able to receive our service. They're able to reciprocate our service, just as the Lord. There are different ways to, different kinds of forms that we can worship the Lord in. Stone, metal, painting, and conceived within the mind. And these are all equally potent forms of the Lord, who appears simply to receive our service, simply to bless us by giving us an opportunity to serve. I just realized how far I've gone over time. I will stop. If someone has something really quick and essential to add, that would be wonderful. Daiva?
Oh, I was just on the,
That was your hand up, right?
well, not really, but I was thinking of something to say, and if it's significant, I don't know. When you just said about the outside devotees that come here, or Indian members or whoever, and the mood is different than 50 years ago, what can we do, or what was different? Two things. One, what was different then that you would analyze, and how can it be reinvigorated?
The only thing we can affect is our own consciousness.
Right.
That's the only thing we have any control over.
So how is it different then?
So perhaps if our service attitude were stronger, and we had we developed more ways to go out and involve the folks and draw them in for engaging in service. But we can, that's the only way. The only way we can affect the other's consciousness is by purifying our own consciousness and sharing that with whoever is open to it. It's just an interesting thing that I've observed that I hadn't really noticed before. It's not like they always come with really pure motives. Sometimes you'll see people, a whole family will walk in the middle of a Bhagavatam class, and they'll march through the temple room. They'll go up, they'll offer some prayers to the deities, ask them to, help them get the promotion or help their kid get the honors degree or something like that. Put a couple of bucks in the hundi, and then they'll walk out. In the meantime, they have no conception that there's Hari Katha going on, which is the real purpose for the temple's existence in the first place.
So could you say it's a loss of culture somewhat? We've seen that in India. Even Prabhupada came to America because he couldn't get support in India. So
Yeah, well, we're 5,100 years into Kali Yuga. What are you going to do? All we can do is improve our own practice. And that's all. I don't have control over anything else. Is that okay?
It's just a little bit more specific. You said 50 years ago it wasn't so much like that. Was there something?
50 years ago, we didn't have so many Indian folks coming anyway.
Oh, okay.
People came largely out of curiosity. It was mostly, there were Indian people in town. There were the Wadamals and a few others, but they weren't particularly, inclined to come. They were among the Waikiki merchants who didn't like our Sankirtan parties because it distracted the tourists.
And sometimes, since we're talking about the Indian diaspora or just the Indian community, sometimes modern devotees criticize that ISKCON is becoming too Hinduized, and I would disagree because, especially a temple like ISC, Vaisheshika, our Durga brother, that they have a lot of Indian community. You feel almost like a minority when you go to one of their programs because there's not too many white devotees, American devotees, European devotees. but he cultivates them so nicely that they're doing full-time work, professionals that are able to do service and help a lot of service. And so maybe that's the key factor is, like you say, when you have that kind of cultivation going on.
Yeah, and that starts in Vaisheshika and Yaragula's hearts.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, that would be the difference between ISV and me. There's a big difference between my heart and Vaisheshika's heart and Yaragula's heart. There's a level of purity and generosity there. And we see that other places as well. I mean, we see that in Denver with Tushta Krishna and Vrinda Sundari. They've got so much going on there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's really something. Or you go up to Ypsilanti and you see Deva Madhava with his harmonious collective up there, and he's able to bring together young hip people, college students, Indian folks, all kinds of folks. He's got this really forward-looking vision. Amazing guy. He's probably like 30 years old now.
Where is this from?
Ypsilanti, Michigan.
Okay.
So there are things happening. You go to Charlottesville, Virginia, where Maya Priya and her husband Amita Chara have been for 28 years, going on 30 years, something like that. They've just been living there, doing their work, maintaining themselves, and maintaining their Bhaktivedanta Center and the University of Virginia's Bhakti Yoga Club. And so many people have, over those last 28, 30 years, they've become involved in Bhakti Yoga to different degrees, many to the point of being of accepting initiation and engaging in full-time service. I mean, some of the people they graduate from the University of Virginia and rather than go to graduate school at some big fancy like research institution or something, MIT or something like that. They might just get their graduate degree at UVA, which is nothing to sniff at. It's a wonderful school. Just so they can stay around Charlottesville and keep Maya Priya and Amita Chara's company and help them. There's one couple initiated by Indradyumna Swami who they have their jobs, but their main reason they're in Charlottesville. They could have gotten PhDs somewhere else, but they've stayed in Charlottesville just to keep that Bhakti Yoga Club and the Bhaktivedanta Center going there. So these things are going on, and it's really a matter of our consciousness. If we could become touchstones like Vaisheshika and Yaragula, Tushta Krishna and Vrinda Sundari, Maya Priya and Amita Chara, then things will happen. One of the deans at the University of Virginia is a devotee. She was Maya Priya introduced me to her as Dean Sandy, and Sandy said, no, please, Bhakti and Sandy. And she's at she's been at every sadhu sangha for, a number of years, every sadhu sangha retreat in North Carolina.
Were they doing a college program that they met her?
I beg your pardon?
Were they doing a college program where they met her, or Harinam?
Yeah. Well, no, they've had this college, they've had this program at the University of Virginia for serving UVA students for decades now. And she's become caught up with that. She's come to know some of the students. I think she's like Dean of Student Affairs or something like that. So she works closely with students, and she started coming to the programs, and turns out she's a devotee. So, it's really just a matter of our consciousness. We can draw other people along, so we can get them out of the idea of thinking that they're just Hindus or something like that, bring them into the realm of Bhakti Yoga. Okay, I'll stop there before the army comes. The National Guard is called out. Thank you so much for your patience and your Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.